the 2021 BFA Senior Thesis Conversations series. On behalf of CCA and my colleagues, we're excited to celebrate the graduating BFA class of 2021. Today, we will hear from 5 such seniors who found home in the Fine Arts Department at CCA. Each of the artists presenting today, we commend for continuing their individual rigorous studio practice in such difficult times. I would also like to thank you, friends, families, and roommates, co-conspirators, for allowing bedrooms to be turned into painting studios, bathrooms into dark rooms, and kitchens into installations. Thank you all for your attendance. We would also like to acknowledge and thank Jamie Austin and Brandes Hofthorstadter in exhibitions for making these happen.
So we're going to introduce the 2 respondents that we have invited for today. Each presentation will take 10 minutes, and then the 2 respondents will respond to the work for 10 minutes. There won't be, unfortunately, time for the audience members to ask questions or to comment, but we definitely encourage you to put your affirmations and, any congratulatory remarks that you'd like to make into the chat, and that chat will be saved and will be sent to each one of the presenters today. So James, do you want to introduce Richard?
Please, yes. So Richard Jonathan Nelson, if you can identify the person waving, hopefully right now, I don't see him, is a multidisciplinary artist who uses textile, video, digital manipulation to create alternative worlds of speculative identity. His work is multi-layered, chromatically intense with mixed images from the natural world with reference to hoodoo, queer culture, and Afrofuturism. His work will be featured in an upcoming exhibition at the San Jose Museum of Art in an exhibition called Queer Threads, and has a solo exhibition also opening Atlanta in the near future. Thank you, Richard Jonathan Nelson, for joining us.
Yes, we're very glad that you can join us. And we also have Katherine Hamilton. And Katherine is an outstanding dual degree student here at CCA, graduate student in the curatorial practice and visual critical studies programs. And during her time at CCA, she's worked for the CCA exhibitions, served as a gallery director for CCA's graduate exhibition space, which is called Play Space, and is currently one of the 2 founding editors of CCA publication that's called Rewind, Respond, and Review. So welcome, Katherine. So our first presenter is one of my students, Annaleah. You're up first.
Hello.
Hi, Annaleah. I think we see your notes. I think you, do a represent.
Okay, sorry guys. Okay, take 2.
No worries.
You got this, Wawa. I love you.
Thanks, guys. Oh, I love technology. Can you see my notes now?
Looks great. No. Thank you.
Great. Hello, my name is Annaleah Gregoire. I'm a sculptor based in Western Massachusetts, and I'm excited to share my new series with you entitled Unpleasantly Beautiful. I was raised here by my single mother who gave me space and materials to play with art. Since I was a child, I would wake up before my mom and little brother and occupy myself with the act of making. I've always found solace in nature, so natural iconography tends to unconsciously make its way into my practice. I'm driven by a seemingly innate need to create. Oh, great. Next, I will be sharing my artist statement. There is a powerful pull toward the strange. I find beauty in looking at the remnants of transformation, what is present yet invisible, what rots and how it transitions over time, and what evokes a visceral reaction. In Unpleasantly Beautiful, I seek to destabilize traditional beauty standards by exposing vulnerable and sometimes disturbing aspects of my body. When we are confronted with images and experiences that defy our aesthetic conventions, we have been culturally conditioned to label this as grotesque. It seems the more violent one's repulsion, the more apparent it is that the individual has unresolved issues regarding the subject at hand. By peeling back layers of flesh and bone, I am able to investigate the dualities of the interior and exterior worlds, as well as the dueling concepts of grotesque and beautiful. My work sits between the real and fantastic in order to highlight moments where beauty and the grotesque merge. Confronting these dualities gives me the tools to reconstruct my own idea of what beauty is. By exposing spots of trauma, layer by layer, Unpleasantly Beautiful illuminates the uncomfortable and honest pain of healing. When I was 15, my mom introduced me to my mentor, Peter Roof, who taught me the ins and outs of oil painting in the art world. He has since become one of my closest friends and an immense source of inspiration. I'm particularly drawn to his abstract expressionist paintings made in the 1960s and the manner in which he morphs human and natural forms. I've also recently been influenced by the sculptures of Sarah Sitkin. Her deconstruction and reconstruction of figures is a potent metaphor that I find reflected in my own work. I'm also inspired by her use of grotesque imagery and the way in which she applies it to contemporary issues. This painting was a commission for my art mentor's brother, Larry Roof. Unfortunately, Larry passed away the same day I was supposed to deliver the finished painting. His unexpected death reminded me of the fragility of life and what it felt like when my reality was shaken and disturbed. It was then that this painting acquired its full meaning of ripping one out of their assumed place in time and questioning the idea of multiple existences or multiple layers of reality. This self-portrait was made using oil paint and thread as a reflection of the stress of 2020, which challenged me in ways that I couldn't have imagined and made me feel incredibly vulnerable. It sheds light on the literal and metaphorical act of mending what is broken to find a sense of newness. Sculpture proposes issues of physics and material choices, which I love troubleshooting, but the simplicity and quietness of painting is healing to me. Here are a couple of detail shots. As someone who struggles with chronic migraines, I sometimes find myself forcing smiles and refraining from visually expressing the pounding in my head. This self-portrait illustrates how people perceive me based on my appearance and how that differs from what I'm experiencing internally. The X-ray serves as a lens for this internal vision. Through dissection and amputation, I have built a visual language with art and science revolving around the visible and invisible wounds of trauma. I use medical and scientific images such as historical and contemporary documents to inform my depictions of the internal form. These materials give my work context outside of my own lived experience and create a more full understanding of the horrors of medical and cosmetic surgery. This is what the sculpture looks like from the other side. And this is the shadow that it cast onto the wall. This piece is called Exposed. As a result of the pandemic, I was forced to adjust my process to one that required extremely little funds or machinery. Since I didn't have access to a cold working shop, I found people who had replaced the windows of their homes and were throwing away the old ones. I ended up with quite a substantial amount of recycled windows. With a forum set up in my dungy New England basement, I created this piece that examines the layers under my cloak of skin. I'm mesmerized by how the aesthetic quality of veins mirrors that of tree roots and branches, as well as the physical attributes that protect my heart. Here's a detail shot. This piece is entitled Shed Your Skin. The etched imagery depicts the anatomical layers of a corn snake. The front panel is the skin, the center panel is the skeleton, and the farthest back panel is the organs of the snake. As snakes shed their skin, they're a symbol of transformation and healing. The surface of the glass mirrors the faces of the community, serving as an invitation for self-reflection and conversations regarding transformation and healing. The transparency of the glass also allows the sculpture to seamlessly integrate with the surrounding environment. This is what the sculpture looks like from the other side. And here's a detail shot. Teeth come up a lot in my work. The most prominent connection I've made is that when I was 6 years old, the dentist pulled the wrong tooth and then proceeded to pull the correct one. The imagery was created in response to that experience. To continue this exploration, I created a dental x-ray of a child's mouth in 24 panels of glass that sit in a light box. I began by finding a 3D digital scan of teeth and then slicing it into 1/8-inch pieces, or the thickness of my panels. As viewers move around the object, the image temporarily disappears and then reappears as they continue revolving. I see my work adding to the sculptural glass canon because many of the glass artists I've seen exhibited so far seem to be searching for beauty, but I'm rather searching for discomfort. Here's another angle. This piece is entitled Sweet Tooth. It was influenced by the lack of access to sufficient dental and medical care for low-income individuals. It's a reflection of the relationship between wealth and the dental industry. Food deserts create a lack of access to healthy food, resulting in poor dental health. In many cases, they do not receive the help they need, which can result in even more damaging health issues. This was created by casting a jaw out of caramelized sugar and embedding teeth into it. The teeth were gifted to me from a cousin who works as a dental assistant and asked her dentist to set aside teeth for the project. My home is very old and the walls are made of plaster, so I was unable to install my work to photograph it here. Fortunately, You and Me Gallery in Greenfield agreed to let me install for the day. And here's a quick walkthrough of the exhibition. Oops. There are so many people I would like to thank for helping me get to this point, but to be conscious of time, I will highlight just a few. My mom and Peter, of course, who have inspired me and supported me every step of the way. My partner, Cameron, who has had to deal with me every hour of every day during the pandemic and handled it with love. A huge thank you to my teachers and friends who have pushed me to expand my creative potential. And lastly, thank you to each of you here today for taking the time to experience my show in this strange virtual setting.
Thank you so very much.
That was wonderful, Annaleah.
Thank you. We will now turn it over to our respondents. So Richard Nelson, please.
You're muted.
You're muted, Richard. Uh-oh.
I think he's suggesting to go on to
Okay, Katherine.
next while he figures it out.
Yeah, Katherine, why don't you start for us? Thank you, Julie.
Yeah, Annaleah, it's so nice to see your work, and Unpleasantly Beautiful is such an apt title for this body of work. Yeah, I mean, it's really too bad. It's such a breath as well to show those three different mediums and to only have 5 minutes to talk about it. So I will, I have a couple questions first. That piece that the sweet tooth piece where you made the jaw out of sugar and those human teeth, something that I'm curious about. It's, really, really striking work in that use of materials and also the history of those materials, as well as something that influence, colonialism and extractive capitalism as influencing, of course, our access to healthcare and how we care about individuals and society. So that was really interesting. But something I'm wondering about is the anonymity of the people who gave you their teeth. Like, what is that role of the knowing or not knowing of those people and having their teeth?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it adds a certain level of I don't know, discomfort. And also because I don't even know if the people whose teeth I'm using actually are aware that their teeth was used in an art project. So I'm not really sure exactly how that contributes to it, minus the discomfort aspect of it. But it was kind of just a way of working with what I had. I had no way of purchasing real human teeth, and my cousin came to the rescue. So it was
No, I mean, I think it's way more interesting the way you source that material because I know you can purchase, or things that look like human teeth, but I think coming about it this way, and yeah, that discomfort, and also thinking about in the medical field of separating the body from the person, I think it speaks to that as well. So that's really interesting. I was also thinking about in your glass sculptures, just how they're really striking. That snake one especially is so beautiful. But then also thinking about, there are these, like you said, really personal, kind of stories. That's a lot of vulnerability in this material that is inherently, it's transparent, right? And so that I just thought that was really, really interesting. These built up layers on this material that it's not only transparent for, if you're in a house, you're looking outwards, but people can look inside as well. So yeah, I thought that use of material tying into your conception was really, really good. And then also the shadows that are produced, I think, are so interesting because like I said, it's something that it's in some ways it is about your body, but it's also about, other people who, like you said, are healing. And so for it to project beyond the sculpture itself, right, onto other bodies or in the room or thinking of the gallery itself as another body, I think really, really speaks to that concept as well. And then, the thinking about the grotesque in the medical field and how also that's just so deeply rooted in art history, and so even though you're talking about these really contemporary but also timeless ideas of healing and trauma, both within the body and the mind. Just that grotesque that is rooted in such a long tradition of art. So yeah, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
I will turn it over to Richard now.
Hi, am I back?
Yeah.
All right. I mean, I was fascinated, amazingly fascinated. And I really began to question and wonder about your relationship between your migraines and the etching of the glass and the sonic frequency. And I was just like, how do you have the endurance to do that?
It's mostly a matter of timing it properly. I simply cannot do it, etch or do really much of anything when I have a migraine. And so it's really these beautiful little in-between moments where I don't have pain, where I hit the fordham and try to get as much work as I can done. But I find that once I get started, it goes by quite quite quickly. And I use like lots of headphones, double layer headphones and stuff like that to try to prevent fatigue.
But I mean, there's like an amazing conversation that's happening between like serenity and trauma and pain and sort of like the manifestation of it and like the multiple layers of images and glass. And even when you started to talk about your own body and trauma and like the physical nature of the veins and the brains, and it made me think of that quote that we've moved the external structure of the female body in corsetry and bustles within the female body, within like plastic surgery and that sort of thing. And it's an interesting that you're layering all these images and it's reminding us of this like understructure and the way we manipulate the human form. And there was like so much information. And then I started to think of like Frida Kahlo and her paintings and being bedridden with her own pain and sort of being in these physical structures and then creating these surrealist images that helped her escape her own body and her own. It's just amazing. Like there's just so much rich material in your work to mine.
Thank you so much.
Richard, I love that you use the words serenity and trauma together. Those are great words for you, Annaleah, to really think about. I mean, trauma, I know, but serenity, I think, is not a word that you've been using. So I would really look into that. That seems so poignant. And I love those two together.
Me too.
And I personally want to throw out a congratulations for finding a source or a location to have an exhibition. That, but that's really wonderful. And it's really great to like, put your work into the world, see how it actually functions, see how daylight really did react to those glass pieces. And the windowness of them in the display also was really cool to notice in the exhibition setting.
Yeah, and it was great that you added that video. That's not something I'd seen, so it was really useful.
Great, thanks guys.
Congratulations to you.
Congratulations, yeah.
Pause quickly. And again, you guys, affirmations and notes in the chats will be recorded for the students, so please keep those coming.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, next up, Carissa.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. Share the screen. Okay. Hi, I'm Carissa Lillian Clark. I'm studying sculpture and community arts through the individualized major. And today I'll be sharing with you my thesis project, Dreamlines and Dirt Scars. I'd like to begin with a quote by Cristina Rivera Garza. If I'm here, how come I'm here? Who is not here so that I can be here? And if we are here because some form of violence is taking place, how can we address the experiences that are relevant not only to the world in which we live, but to the world that we want to create? This is the land that I grew up on. It's the unceded territory of the Wiyot people, and this is Potawat, the Mad River. Throughout my life, this river has provided a site for celebration, grieving, learning, and nourishment. Allison Smith, through craft, sculpture, and social performance, practices historical reenactments as pathways to new possibilities for past, present, and future. Smith has inspired me and supported me in this work through several generative studio visits. I've had the incredible opportunity to work alongside David Solnit in collaboration with Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and People, Save the West Berkeley Shell Mound, 1,000 Grandmothers, and many more, to paint guerrilla-style street murals protesting the development of West Berkeley Shell Mound and the construction of the Line 3 pipeline in Minnesota. These actions use art as a powerful tool for protest and social change. What does a map do to a place? How do lines on a piece of paper entangle, disrupt, and erase people's lives? Land surveyors in the 1850s worked in service to the United States to swiftly expand settler colonialism throughout California. These settlers inflicted a devastating genocide on the indigenous peoples of these valleys, mountains, and coastlines. Entitlement, greed, and massive federal funding fueled this violent era. Maps gave the white settlers an all-seeing vision of access, domination, accumulation, and control. Their maps changed this place. Shortly after moving to the East Bay, I learned something about my family that called me to face the violent history and intergenerational grief of California in a personal way. A distant ancestor of mine on my mother's side, John Jack Coffee Hayes, a military leader during the US invasion of Mexico, followed the gold rush to California. Hayes was one of the first US settlers to purchase land from the Peraltas, a Spanish settler family who occupied Huichin, the unceded land of the Lisjan Ohlone people in present-day Oakland. In 1852, Hayes became the US Surveyor General of California. His maps are blueprints from the origin story of today's society, filled as it is with oppression, displacement, borders, and systemic white supremacy, where capital and property are valued above human life and the health of the land. In fact, he's celebrated by a local private fraternal organization, the John Coffee Hayes Club. Their website reads, Hayes was an American icon who lived by, respected, and honored the heritage of the American firearm. We have organized a club through which we as free men may unite to address the responsibilities we have to defend, protect, and promote our shared American heritage, American culture, and the American way. This discovery haunted me. I sought to find ways to use my art practice to denounce this glorification of the atrocious narratives of white supremacy and condemn the violence, trauma, and destruction caused by my ancestors. So I started reading. These books illuminate so many critical truths about California history and are testaments to the courage and resilience of California Indians as they resisted genocide and continue to resist the oppressions of settler colonialism. I started writing letters with my great uncle Boogie, a Texas historian. He shared hand-drawn cartoons, life stories, old photos, and revealing details about my family that encouraged me to pursue questions of role and responsibility further. And I visited the gravesite of Jack Coffee Hayes in Mountain View Cemetery in Oakland. My sister, a clairsentient psychic medium and intuitive tarot reader, came with me. With protections in place, we called him in and asked him questions. Later, I returned to his grave, said prayers, asked permission, and carefully harvested soil from where a gopher had spilled some on the concrete path. I came across this map in the David Rumsey Historical Map Collection, authored by Hayes in 1854. I began to ask, how can maps help us see the ways the present is shaped by the past so that we may navigate into new and radical terrain? How may I invite others to reflect on our interconnected and unresolved histories, to share visions for the future, a future that prioritizes the people who have lived in loving relationship with this land for thousands of generations? Since early 2020, I have worked as part of the collectively run gallery in downtown Oakland, Dream Farm Commons. We are an exhibition and residency space for radical imagination, visual works, and social practice. My co-creators here have been instrumental in the development of my thesis project. Until the end of April, I'm building a performative and participatory installation at Dream Farm Commons. On the tall storefront windows, I'm painting a current street map of Oakland. Inside the gallery, a large scroll of canvas references 19th century panorama paintings, but is woven through the banisters, draped to the floor, and stretched across the space. Using the soil from Hayes' gravesite, I am painting imagery from local 19th century maps that traces watersheds and coastlines, looking past the property borders and grid lines of the settlers, exploring the visual threshold where water meets the land. Behind the canvas, I'm experimenting with shadow imagery, using fallen branches, eucalyptus bark, and paper silhouettes. I invite viewers, as I invite you, if you're in Oakland, to consider the interwoven histories that have brought you onto the Lisjan Ohlone land, known as Huichin. Consider your relationship with this land. And I invite you to imagine the futures possible here. Imagine the worlds you want to see. Imagine the future generations of Ohlone peoples here. Imagine tomorrow. Imagine next year. Imagine your children's grandchildren and Ohlone grandchildren walking these streets and hills and shorelines. What do you dream for the future of this land? What do you demand for the future of this city? Outside the gallery, people have been responding. Their responses are posted on the windows. There's a demand for a place for people to meditate. A dream that no one is left behind. A demand to give Indigenous peoples their land back. A dream for housing for all. A dream to stop hatred. This work is unfinished. This work will never be finished. Generations into the future, I hope my descendants and their descendants find new ways to condemn and counteract the harms caused by me, my lineage, and by all of us who are benefiting from the injustices committed on this land. This project is a small gesture that endeavors to open doors for transformative conversations and shed light on the vast landscapes of our collective imagination. For their support and encouragement in this project, I would like to thank Erin Gash, Allison Smith, Ann Schnacky, Carla Smith, Karina Gold, Dan Boogie Winans, Deborah Valoma, Erin Caitlin Sweeney, Fufu Lupe Nimetolu, Humadar, Jacqueline Castillo, Jess Young, Kari Marbo, Ken Becker, Lexa Walsh, Michael Bogan, Sam Vernon, Shalini Agrawal, Suzanne Cockrell, Yulia Greenkrug, my parents, Al and Carlotta, my sister Chanel, my love, Jessie, and the well-meaning ancestors who are guiding me through this journey. Thank you.
Thank you. That was beautiful, Carissa.
Thank you, Carissa.
Richard, do you want to start since you were unable to last time?
Yes, thank you so much. Oh, Carissa, I have to congratulate you on the work, and I have to, you lift my heart. It lifts my heart to see an artist of Caucasian descent minding their own personal narrative and their own history, and to use that material to create work. And for me personally, as like an African-American artist, I've had so many conversations of people with like white artists who are like, what do I make? What do I do in this moment? Like what? And it's just like, there's so much there. There's like, we all have personal narratives, we all have personal histories, we all have connections to the land, to society, to so many things. And it's like, it's amazing work to see. And it gives me hope. It really does. And I'm so thankful.
Thank you so much.
And it's amazing. And I'm like, and the social practice aspect of it, to give a voice back to the people, to open these conversations to the public, because it's, as a person of color, we always have this conversation of that we can talk about this so many times, but it has to come from somebody who looks like the people we're trying to reach. And it's like, you're this mediary. You're a person who's stepping into that arena and saying, you know what, like, I can't fix this problem, but I'm going to try to facilitate a conversation. And I'm going to use my access to try to get like these voices heard. And that is amazing.
That's really well said. And I do want to comment that Carissa has been very active and very thoughtful and reaching out to people who she needed to reach out to speak to, and very conscious of the complications of her position.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure she's very, very happy to hear your response.
But I mean, I'm very interested in like the direction of the research and like where these future dialogues will go. I'm interested in seeing like a performative lecture from you of like your own history and the history of this country. And it's, I feel like we so quickly forget that the history of America and the larger territories, and that the definition of what it means to be free in the beginning of this country was to own property or to own land or to own other people. And I've been recently watching a lot of British cinema, and the idea of traversing the land and the gentry and the landed class, and this like freedom and ability to walk across open spaces or to walk across public lands and to feel safe. And I feel like there's a touchstone with that, within your work, that the ability, the freedom to like manifest destiny, that you have the access to go from one side of this country to the other and to feel perfectly safe and to feel that this is your home. And I think for a lot of people, you don't truly feel like this land is your home.
Thank you, Richard.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely all of what Richard said as well. It's so evident that there's like so much care in this work. So yeah, I mean, that's really evident, which is awesome. I'm going to give you, before I talk about the work itself, I want to give you 3 names, 2 of who are theorists, and 1 is a student who I think you need to get in touch with ASAP to do a studio visit. So in thinking about, to me, your work about like mapping also speaks to that familial archive, right? You know, seeing those like letters that were stacked on top of each other. Yeah, mining your own personal history, like Richard said, and but also that familial archive and those images. And then also, so one person who I think you might want to look at is in terms of approaching an archive from a different way or using a different method is Tao Le Goff. Goffe is her last name. She's a professor at Cornell University, and she works through different archives, thinking through her history as both a Black and Asian woman from the Caribbean. And then thinking about different ways to think through mapping as acknowledging it as a colonial tool and thinking of ways, again, different methods to approach it, is Lawrence Abu Hadman. He does a lot of work with sound, but it could just be interesting. I've seen some of his maps that he's trying to think of them as less stable, which I think you're thinking about as well as destabilizing that colonial narrative of possession through mapping. And then Rebecca Sexton, you need to email as soon as this is done. Her master's thesis was on her ancestors. She's from, I think, somewhere in the Pacific Northwest, and they were loggers. And so she thinks a lot about, you know, the harm that her ancestors have done, not only to the land, but her own family, and how she's been mining that archive. So I think that would be a meaningful connection. Okay, not that much time left after that, but yeah, just really interesting work. Something that I have a question of, how do you want to archive this work once it comes down? You know, how are you thinking of it's unfinished, but that future archive of this work?
That's a great question. I've had help with documenting it through photo and video, which is like maybe the most successful thing I'm feeling right now, is that like I actually reached out to a bunch of photographers and a couple of videographers for help. And so I think of it in those terms. I appreciate the ephemerality of it, but the thing that I don't know if this is exactly archive, but you know, I have this huge roll of canvas. That's what the majority of the installation inside is. And I'm excited about using it in future paintings and iterations of sculptural paintings, and hopefully in collaboration with other people to further this work and bring it into new directions. I really feel like the subject matter calls for collaboration, and so none of these materials will be thrown away. I promise you that. They will have future lives, and this project maybe will, you know, be an ancestor of future projects.
But yeah, I think that's a really nice way to think about it. And also, yeah, just that using the dirt as the paint, firstly, it looks great. And also just to have that, you know, in terms of like thinking through archives of old maps and stains, I think it, you know, looks great. And then you have that really meaningful material connection back to your ancestors. So Yeah, congratulations again. I'll try and go see that installation next time I'm in Oakland.
Oh yeah, it'll be up till April 26th. I'm gonna come check it out. It's entirely participated or like experienced from the street, so there's no coming inside. Thank you so much, Richard. And thank you so much, Katherine.
Thank you, Carissa, so much. That was really wonderful. That was really great. Now it's my turn to introduce our next artist, Jillian Shea.
Hello. All right. Hi, my name is Jillian Shea, and I am a graduating senior from CCA's Painting and Drawing program. And today I am going to share two bodies of work with you. So a little background. I grew up with my mom and dad and older brother in a single-story house in the suburban development of Murnan in San Rafael, California. We went to church, we took a summer vacation every year, and my brother and I were active in sports. It was a very nuclear family upbringing. And in high school, I fell in love with painting as a sort of escape from this tightly wound life. And the love affair has deepened ever since. So Malcolm Lipka is a figure painter I pull inspiration from for his application of paint. I think it's so lovely, the buttery, luscious, wet texture of it, and I love the color he uses in flesh tones. And my favorite figure painter ever, Jenna Gribben. I am also in love with the way that she applies paint. It's really intentional and you can really see the layering. She recently created a series of moments with her kid and her girlfriend. She describes her work as painting from inside the scopophilic feedback loop, which I think is a really lovely sentence. There's a sensuality and intimacy that you can see in my own work. So I just want to give a little backstory. Coming into college, I was processing an abusive relationship I was in for 19 months, which is where the title of this triptych comes from. The aftermath was dark and destructive, and this piece was created in the throes of that aftermath. I sort of closed this chapter in my life by making a short film about it. It's still something that stays with me. I can't get rid of it, but it doesn't consume my life anymore. So here is a clip of stained underwear. So in the present moment, or the last year or so, I've been thinking about my personal space, my relationships, and my memories. This first body of work acts as a diary, a sort of place to record small things. With the isolation of the pandemic, I've spent a lot of time thinking back on memories of time spent with other people, people I miss very much. I've also spent a lot of time around my home. I've started making paintings of the little moments. They're like snapshots. There's a photographer, Vivian Meyer, who collected her entire life's work in the attic of a home in which she worked, only to have it found after her death. The collection is cataloged and lives on. And I like to think of my work in a similar way, like you're peering into an empty house's window, trying to catch glimpses of the lives lived there. Finding my home also meant finding safety. After years of rebuilding trust with myself, I was able to do that with another person. It's the sweet and mundane things that feel like such a win. Getting to feel happy and loved is a very special thing. In the midst of the pandemic, I started selling explicit images of myself online. It was a bit of a cash grab and a little bit of an exhibitionist adventure. My mom found out and approached me not so subtly with her internalized misogynistic Catholic morals. This body of work is taking on a shift in perspective of the figure. I'm looking at it as an exploration of my own sexuality while also asking these larger questions about digital culture and sex. It got me thinking about societal standards for the body and the differences in perceiving pornographic or explicit imagery through photography versus painting and the art historical canon of the nude. It's been a liberating experience owning my body and presenting it on my own terms. These are a couple of detail shots. I love the brush strokes in the hair and the roughness of the tattoo and just the subtlety in the shadows. This is my largest painting yet. It's still a work in progress, but this entire process has been a really special experience for me. The little highlights from the light filtering through the foliage outside the window are my favorite. This one is also a work in progress. It's been really interesting taking note of the internalized shame I experienced when thinking about showing this work. But it's also been really exciting to feel better about it coming towards the end of this series. And these are just some shots of my studio. On the right is my latest painting I've started. Thank you so much for joining me. If you would like to follow my work, my Instagram handle, and I'd like to thank all of the teachers I've had at CCA, my family, my best friends, everybody who has supported me. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Jillian.
Thank you. It was so good to see your work, Jillian.
Thank you. All right. I think is it Katherine will be the first to respond on this one? Are we good on that?
Yeah, Jillian, really striking and I think brave work. It's so, I mean, you, I'm sure know better than I do. It's so strange to feel like we're living in such a progressive time, and yet anytime women want to take control of their image, of their body, it can be met with so much resistance, and sometimes from people you don't expect. So yeah, I think it's really brave work. Some of the words that I wrote down that I was thinking about were like memory and moment. I think that's kind of across your paintings, and using, like you said, like a more, the lines aren't so sharp, right? And so for me, that really speaks to holding a still image, you know, of a moment in your mind's eye. Those having the lines not be so sharp. have you read Lucy Lepard's Pink Glass Swan? It's a collection of essays. I think I like that collection of essays, and there are a couple that think a little bit on yeah, the women's agency and ways to represent ourselves, and thinking about, where does agency and power lie in our bodies, and in our control over our bodies. And I think, to me, that's something that your work is definitely investigating. Another artist that I wrote down was Marguerite Humea. She's a French artist, and she had a piece at the New Museum called Birth Canal. And it was these recreations of those like ancient, oh my goodness, the deities, and they have like huge breasts and stomachs. And so she was thinking of like a world that would create, like what world would those beings create. And I'm seeing just some parallels in terms, like totally different mediums, but some parallels in terms of thinking of the worlds, because some of them are portraits of you, but some of them are portraits of other people. And like, what are the worlds that those figures would create, and those like figures in those specific moments as being, taken from your memory or taken from your life, but they inhabit a different form and in a different world through your hand, and through your imagination. So yeah, really, really congratulations on this body of work, and on sharing the body of work with us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Katherine.
Hi, Katherine. Hey, Jillian. Congratulations. Congratulations on making captivating, interesting, complex work. And so have you seen the work of Erin Riley and her selfies and images of other women making tapestry? It made me think of that, of just like, but Erin Riley, Petra Cartwright, and her use of like cam images and like her own body and digital culture. Your work made me think of like so many things that I'm just like, as like a queer man, there's like a sort of attraction to it. You're just like, oh, you're just like brightly colored. But the work made me think of conversations around euphoria and like Xennial and millennial culture, the use of makeup, color, lighting, and the way it differs from a masculine perspective of the world, where there is strength in sort of glitter and artifice, and it's disarming. It also made me think of conversations around Joan from Mad Men as a sort of complex Venus, or a modern Venus, that she never shies away from her femininity or her body. It is a source of strength and power, and she will not be subjugated or criticized for that. There are so many other things. Conversations around the new movie Promising Young Woman, and the way the cinematography happens in that film, that when we think of power, we always think of desaturated color and sort of grunge and darkness, but there is like a candy coatedness to it. And we don't associate that with strength, but it is strong and it is powerful. And just amazing. Amazing. I mean, just my mind is abuzz. But I do find it fascinating the way you show intimacy within your own interpersonal relationships, and then the way you switch your color palette for your own work, and sort of the way the line blurs and becomes more complex for the depictions of yourself and your own internal world, and the sort of like amorphous melding nature of you and your partner, which is very interesting to me. And your video work. Continue with the video work. You give me Sofia Coppola vibes, like Virgin Suicides, just like so many 90s feels that I'm just fascinated by.
I love that. Thank you.
That's great that you brought those things up, Richard. I think we've had a similar kind of conversations, and these are new names, but yeah, I mean, I just want to kind of throw out there that in observation of examining your own body and then looking at your partner and kind of changing the script between painter and sitter, using your partner and then looking at your own body, and then thinking about your partner looking at your body, and then the reiteration of the phone, and like these kind of cycles that kind of tornado off of each other, that everyone's in on it, and this is kind of it's kind of a painted opera of an apartment kind of going on. And I just want to acknowledge that that is a really interesting back and forth between monochromatic portraits of the male figure at gaze at you, in gaze pose, and then you kind of in full form, decorating the body, celebrating your body, compromising your body in much more full-throated palette, I think is a really wonderful contrast. Thank you so much, Jillian.
I just want to add one thing. I don't know you, and I haven't been, privy to your process, but just as an outsider, seeing your work and hearing how you processed the years that you've gone through while you were at CCA, I just want to take note of how incredibly courageous your work is. It's striking.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So now we will move on to Darius Varize. Darius, are you ready to present?
Hi everyone, how are you doing? I'm ready. Hi, my name is Darius Varize. I'm a painting and drawing major, and I'm graduating this spring. Growing up, I've always been infatuated with Japanese manga and cartoons. Reading Dragon Ball Z and building Legos inspired me to make my own characters and stories. With drawing, I had to integrate these childlike ideas in juxtaposition to the real world. Drawing is the foundation of my art practice. It has allowed me to sit with my ideas and has given me an appreciation for painting. The use of the human body, comedy, and the grotesque are all ideas that are prevalent in my work. So here's some influences. So this drawing marks a pivotal point for me as an artist. It is a defining moment where I really felt like I knew what I wanted to do. I think I made it around 10 or 11. But I put it here to kind of preface my career as an artist. Creating images that are ominous or unsettling has an allure that is hard to duplicate. I see a beauty in the ugly. Uncanny images or pictures that are imagined in the space of reality intrigue me the most because it feels like I'm in control of the viewer. I think creating this false reality makes an interesting experience for a painting. So in 2018, I started painting what I like to call flesh cacti. So here's like the first one I ever did. Here are a few more drawings, like revisiting this idea of this sort of ambiguous form. Expanding on the idea of the cacti, I wanted to see how I could get the same unsettling feeling with a more straightforward approach, instead using myself as the focus. So this is a self-portrait I did in 2019. Creating characters has always been a part of my practice. With painting, I had to figure out the most effective way to include my line without taking away from the paint. This piece, titled Pressure, frankly has very serious qualities, but is accompanied with rather silly and lighthearted undertones. The next few pieces show more of my influences as a painter. I'm fascinated by the loose painterly techniques of the early Impressionists like Van Gogh and Monet. Another artist I've been looking at right now is David Kakabaze. I just provided some references here. here are a few of my recent paintings. This one titled The Atom, oil on canvas. This one titled Gliding. This one's titled Reflection. So this is a work in progress, but playing with more motifs from manga, I meant to make this explosion as a reference to nostalgia. I wanted images to read as distant memories from a small child faintly popping in and out of frame. So there's these like small little items that I've kind of like had throughout my childhood, and I kind of just want to play with this idea of nostalgia. This is another recent piece that trying to integrate this idea of like comic books and like manga and all this, the iconography that comes with that into like my actual paintings, and just kind of trying something a little more muted. Okay, so last year before the pandemic, I began creating digital collages that were an accumulation of my drawings on top of found fashion ads. I used scans from Vogue, National Geographic, and even some of my own iPhone photos. So this first one's titled Cans. It's 8 by 10. This one's titled Yoked. This one's titled Small Distinction. Caviar. Seat loaf. And so with these compositions, I hope to bridge the gap between my paintings and my drawings and hopefully find a healthy medium between the two. Thank you for listening. And you can reach me at these places. I just want to say thank you to all my teachers and my parents and just like all my friends and everyone that's like ever supported me throughout this like journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Darius. Great job. And it was really wonderful to see those new works in there, the digital prints. Thank you so much. I will turn the conversation over to Richard.
Hi, Darius. Now, you know, after seeing that work, you have me hungry for animation. Like, I want to see these images move. I want anime outros and intros. I want like fooly cooly, like fast segments of just like GIFs. You know, I just want all of it. It's very fascinating to see someone using anime and manga culture, and instead of just reproducing the sort of source imagery, like translating it within their own dialogue and their own vision. The photo collage, fascinating, very interesting to me. Like, it reminds me of 90s era Japanese zines, like record covers, album covers. It's, oh my goodness. And I'm blanking on the name. James knows him. He is a gay male artist, does photography. It's digital prints, collage. He came to CCA when I was an undergrad. But it's very much, it borders between painting, photography, fashion, illustration, it's digital prints, there's like installations, like some of the prints become fabric that are overlaid, that become graffiti, that become stickers and posters. And it's just sort of this overload, which I also feel like is a reference to the original source material of like Japanese manga from Yukio prints, and sort of being this like fast commodity that was wallpaper, that was clothing, that was like every aspect of life was covered in these characters. And there's just like, it's a rich source material you're working with. Like there's just so much that it can be high art, it can be super flat, it can be in a museum, but then at the same time, it can be the most like common object that everyone takes home, that you sort of integrate yourself. Like it's amazing. It's very interesting. And
thank you so much for that.
Yeah. I mean, just there are like so many interesting things and so many artists that I'm just like, I wish I could remember to send you this. That it's just like people who are using like projectors and multiple images and not stopping at like the first composition, that they're continuing to put more and more references from just like from their own childhood National Geographic images, from their childhood drawings, to then like overlaying a Ren and Stimpy cartoon, to then putting like something from like a Miyazaki film on top of it, and just letting that, and it's referencing Van Gogh, and it's referencing Japanese art where it's like hyper flat, densely, like there's just so much. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Wow, you have like experts everywhere and all these great like little great pieces of knowledge. That was really wonderful. Yeah, the 90s Japanese scenes, cool reference to think about. Katherine.
Yeah, I totally agree with Richard. I would love to see little gifts of that. But also just in terms of like the really rich source material and how many different like references, especially in those collages, well, even in the paintings of references to, like you said, like your own childhood and just, you know, source material that you grew up with, but also I have to bring art history into it. Also really deep art historical, you know, record. And it was so interesting to see you say, well, I'm looking at Van Gogh, but also, you know, manga, because of just how much those painters and their flatnesses were looking at, well, specifically a Japanese woodblock painting. And when I saw the self-portrait you did, where you're like, it's so funny, but like you said, as with the pressure piece, it's some like serious subject matter and exploring the self through this style. There was an artist who, you know, like many artists, were not celebrated in their lifetime. His name was Yorotsu Tetsu Goro, and he was really interested in European art and the kinds of inspirations that, and so his work ends up being this kind of like feedback loop of culture looking at culture, looking at culture, looking at culture. And so there's a self-portrait that he has where, you know, he's bringing in fauvism, but he also has like manga hair. And so it could be just, you know, interesting to think about that. And I was also thinking about this tension between commodity and portrait that is kind of inherent in the style that you're looking at. And then also, especially in those collages where you are taking images from, you know, like you said, fashion magazines, or that kind of vernacular of commodity, but subverting it because, you know, like I said, it's zine, like it's DIY, like it's I don't know, there's like a raw a rawness to it too. So it's not that kind of like polished, like super flat kind of commodity. So I just think there's like a lot of like cycles in your work that are looping and never ending. And yeah, it's really interesting. So yeah, congratulations.
Thanks, Katherine. Yeah, when you said that looping thing, Darius, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but yeah, that's a really great. I even saw that in your own painting where you're referencing your older paintings in your new painting.
Thank you, guys. Yeah.
I just want to add one little thing. What struck me, again, not knowing your work only from this presentation, is that I was drawn inward into looking really closely at my screen because there's a lot of detail and there's a kind of childlike innocence to it. And so I'm pulled in by that, but then I'm also, once I get closer, there's a kind of repulsion that happens because there's a kind of grotesqueness, there's a little bit of, you know, disturbance happening in the portrayal of the imagery. So that I had this kind of pull towards and then this push away. And I think that's a really successful strategy to engage the body of your audiences, whether it's on the, you know, screen or, and I definitely love the idea of animation, of course. But even if it were in a gallery, I would have that experience of stepping forward into it and then being troubled by it, you know, some of the imagery. So I think that's a perfect edge to land on.
Thank you, Deborah.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for showing us your work.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're ready to move on. Yes, James?
Mhm.
Okay, so the last presenter for the day is Joel. And Joel, are you ready to go?
Yep.
Great. Are your people here? Because we're a little bit earlier than you and I had imagined.
Yeah, I let the people know that it was running a little early. So thanks for checking.
Good.
All right. Well, thank you guys for being here. My name, once again, is Joel Murnan. I'm a sculpture major here at CCA, and this is my BFA Senior Conversation for Spring 2021. So I'd first like to start out with a land acknowledgement for the area that I currently live in that is now known as Grass Valley, California. We acknowledge that the Nisenan people are still here among us today, though nearly invisible. We understand that we are on Nisenan land that was never ceded, and the original tribal families have yet to recover from the near genocide of their people. As a resident or visitor in Nisenan land, we support the Nevada City Rancheria Nisenan tribe in the efforts to stabilize their people, as well as their campaign to restore federal recognition. For more information and to support the tribe, please visit nisenan.org. Invention in 1867, known as the Devil's Rope, altered the history of the American West in the blink of an eye. A grid was plotted by the hand of manifest destiny that violently excluded, destroyed, and wreaked havoc on the indigenous tribes, wildlife, and ecology of the West. Barbed wire would become the pencil that drew the first demarcations into the landscape. As I look around my family's ranch, it's obvious how barbed wire controls the land. As far back as I can remember, I've been surrounded by enclosures. The fencing is old. It's crooked, broken, rusted, and filled with rot. I've come to know these tools on a personal level as flesh-ripping devices that cut, tangle, twist, and reshape the movement of this land for both humans and wildlife alike. Fences and Fables explores my familial history in the settling of the West, which is rooted in my great-grandfather's coal mine, the tradition of ranching, and my own experiences growing up around barbed wire. In the pastures of my own home, I have snipped the wire, pulled the nails, and removed the posts to be reused as a material for sculptures that examine the privatization of land. This process has led me to create dioramas, which survey artificial landscapes to confront the present issues of accessibility within contemporary American culture. So this is a lot I'd like all to consider, and it kind of got me started in these considerations, is freedom to roam. It's the general public's right to access certain public or privately owned lands, lakes, and rivers for recreation and exercise. It's a law taken up in many other countries, but there's no such law like this in the United States. In my hometown of Grass Valley, fences are everywhere. It wasn't until my father passed away that I gained much more responsibility on the ranch, which led me to ask new questions about property, ownership, and local boundaries. I then looked to my past to learn how my ancestors came into the US. My great-great-grandparents, Emil and Elizabeth Reichert, moved to Utah from Germany with the help of the Mormon Church in 1905. Emil worked the mines to support his family, and his son, Otto, my great-grandfather, would later own a coal mine in Sevier, Utah. I considered the abuse of land, the territorial aspects of mining, and its impacts on the ecology, and created a physical sculpture that I documented in natural sunlight. As I researched, I found that canaries were used in rudimentary ways to detect poisonous gases, to alert miners that it was no longer safe in the shaft. This process killed many canaries in my great-grandfather's mine. The impact jolted a memory of my mother, Debbie, who bred canaries within our own home. She was this snow white figure who would let them out and fly around on her shoulder just to say hi. Her actions healed past mistakes, which inspired me how I could do so as well. I started by looking at my past relationship with the land and made collages that referenced internal dialogues I had with the landscape and the wildlife. When I looked through my childhood lens, I recalled multiple dreams that occurred throughout my life here. These dreams involved crossing the fence and experiencing a new world. It was freeing, but in each dream, wire was a hindrance that manifested itself no matter what. So I looked into its history. The invention of barbed wire completely divided the landscape and ended open land access for all who called the West home. Illegal fence lines began popping up everywhere and restricted travel and access to resources. A cowboy gang called the Snippers cut illegal lines in response. This became an issue for farmers, so they made an explosive device called angel makers, killing the person, livestock, and destroying the fences in one fell swoop if it lost tension. The aggression of property lines continues within the present American culture. It's so aggressive that my friend and I have been left terrible notes, we've been yelled at, and have even been held at gunpoint for fishing. It's disappointing to look at other countries that grant the public freedom to roam private land, and in the States, you can be shot legally just for crossing a line. I've seen so many threatening signs in the area that read trespassers shot on sight, which you can buy at the local Tractor Supply. If you take a closer look at the sign, you'll notice it's underlined in barbed wire, further establishing the symbolism that it holds. Ranches played a part in the demarcation of land and exclusion of place, and the tool used to do so was the devil's rope. After gaining this understanding, I made works that symbolically dismantled the residue of my family's ranch by taking the old posts, nails, and barbed wire down. At the center of each are private property lines in the area. By looking at myself and my place in the conversation, I'd like to be a part of the solution. My first steps are still taking place through a process of unlearning by working with the physical materials that aided westward expansion. My process has in no way, shape, or form been linear. In actuality, it's been full of twists and turns, just like barbed wire itself. I've had discussions with an Indigenous artist, Judith Lowry, as well as a local artist and historian, Hank Mills, to provide me with guidance, experiences, and knowledge to further my work, understanding, and reconsideration of barbed wire, colonialization, and their effects. In this series of dioramas, situations are presented that illuminate the exclusion that barbed wire creates as both a symbol and a material. From a young age, dioramas have been something I was drawn to create. It wasn't until later that I learned more about their history. Dioramas function as a colonial mindset that freezes the land, animals, and people in time. I use dioramas to unstick time and to deconstruct the institutional narratives established in the 19th and 20th century. In avoiding manifest destiny, the latter addresses barbed wire as an obstacle to overcome. A gate functions as a continuation of a fence, while a stepladder is an act of avoidance that in turn destroys its agency and allows all access. Go get the ball, Adam references the age-old tale of losing the ball on the other side of the fence, and the fear a child has of leaving their border and entering a new one. The fence is exposed as a threshold that begs the question of how boundaries are instilled into the American youth. My next work references the biblical origins of barbed wire, the eyes of its inventor, Gilbert Galviard, whose only patent drawing depicts a cow reaching for forbidden fruit on the other side of the fence. In Forbidden Fruit, the boss barb beats, two cows have met under a light post, unable to be together. In an act of control, barbed wire beats evil, keeping the livestock innocent and contained within the American frontier. This frontier is symbolically viewed as a Garden of Eden that is protected under establishment of Christianity, barbed wire, and manifest destiny. In ping pong, diplomacy refers to the political nature of the game. In 1970, the game of ping pong was used as a catalyst to speed relations between China and the States. In this work, ping pong is reused as a tool to dismantle boundaries. The table is placed between two properties. The barbed wire feeds into the net of the table, acknowledging the division of land, and the device that constricts the game into a game that invites the community to play together. With the close of my presentation, it is my hope that these works reframe and bring attention to what barbed wire has done, is doing, and will continue to do within the United States as a symbol of aggression, exclusion, and oppression. And finally, I want to say thank you to everybody. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you for my peers for presenting. And thank you to everybody that supported me throughout my college education. You all made this possible. And once again, thank you.
Thank you, Joel. That's powerful work. And I know you've been working really hard to think through the complications and your own position. Yeah. So are we starting? I've lost track. Are we starting with Richard this time? No, Katherine?
Let's do Katherine just for good measure.
Oh, okay. Sure. Yeah, Joel, there is so much, so much to say about this work. Wow. Congratulations. My notes are they're, I think I wrote like, yeah, okay. So firstly, I just want to start with your introduction, I guess, and that sentence that everyone called out, and just to call it out, to you specifically, that the barbed wire is the pencil that drew the demarcations. Like, wow, that's a great line. And especially in the introduction to your work about thinking through barbed wire, and that metaphor of the pencil, because it's possible. And I think your work points to possibilities where it can be undone, where property doesn't have to be private to such a violent extent. So yeah, really, I mean, and I think your whole introduction was great, but yeah, that sentence is really beautiful. There's a book I want to recommend to you if you haven't already read it, which is called On Longing by Susan Stewart. Have you read that one?
No, I haven't. Yeah.
Yeah, so she talks about miniatures and narratives of the miniatures and the gigantic, the souvenir, and the collection. And so actually I do have one question, which is, how are the dioramas, or are they how are they displayed in a gallery?
Yeah, so the plan is, once I can show them physically, I'd like to create survey transits, like the old antique like tripods that they'd use as surveys. And I'd like to create a small looking box that can peer through. So it kind of relates back to the first moments that the land was being just taken up and surveyed and divided amongst settlers. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that'll be a really cool presentation. Because yeah, thinking about the miniatures of this other form in some ways of domination, but then kind of subverting it, because you're not pointing towards more privateness, you're pointing towards like different futures. And the one that you said was pointing towards the biblical allegory of the forbidden fruit of the two cows. Oh my God. It's just the kind of playfulness, but of something that's so poignant and such a huge topic. And I was also thinking about, the miniature, nativity scenes and other things of the Bible, of biblical nature, that get miniaturized. And yeah, just thinking about that kind of tension of scale in your work that is about vast amounts of land and a huge history of violence, and literally shrinking it down. I think that's really really interesting. And then another site of I guess kind of tension is the sculptures themselves as objects that could hurt the handler or the viewer if they got too close, and thinking of, you know, them as property, whether it's your property as the artist or the property of the gallery, and the kinds of systems that are in place, you know, for art as private property, and the huge amounts of, you know, capital behind, you know, art. And so I think a lot of the time people, especially with socially engaged art, people will be like, well, why does it matter? Because it's futile. And so I think this really, in a lot of ways, that kind of poetics of the danger of the sculptures themselves kind of breaks out of that futility in a lot of ways. So yeah, congratulations on some really, really interesting work.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Joel.
Hey.
Hey. I mean, yes, also congratulations on some very like powerful, interesting, complex work. Like just the way you talk about barbed wire, and you started to make, you really just generated this feeling in me that it's amazing how quickly, because I come from dairy farmers back in Georgia, how you erase spaces of land in your mind because they are private property. It's just like acres and acres of property. And I also come from like fishermen, and just entire islands are gone in your memory because you know it's private property, and you know the danger and the physical threat that could happen if you cross this.
Right.
And then to be reminded of barbed wire, and it's just like, oh my goodness, like how much of my mind have I noticed this barrier, acknowledged it, and never questioned or approached it because this like visceral association with it. And for you to turn it into this like art object that is beautiful and seductive and draws you in. And then the dioramas have me, there's always been this thing of just like being fascinated by, there's like an entire island off the coast of Georgia that I can't go to, and what is there? And there are entire like spaces of the West Coast that are just private property, and I can never go. And then it's always an interesting thing to see people who aren't afraid to cross that barrier, or who embrace the right to roam and cross it and bring back pictures. And you're like, it's beautiful, it's fantastic, it's amazing, and I wish I could go there. But there's like this deep rooted fear in crossing that private property line. And it's just like, your sculptural objects become like this glimpse into a world that I'm always wanting to go to, that I wonder if I will ever be able to reach or see, or like a landscape that I'm fascinated by. And it's just, it draws you in, it's seductive, and it's amazing, and it's just, and you then begin to question the materials of like the two-dimensional work, and you're just like, oh, I thought that was a painting or an illustration, but no, it's the physical object. And it's in the same way that you look at topographic maps, and you're just like, no, these ridges and lines are just vast like landscapes of the country. And it's just, you're just generating so many thoughts of just like, this country is huge, and we navigate such like narrow parts of it and such small parts of it, and you're just like, yeah, I'm speechless. I am just, you have me. You just had me at that. I'm just like, oh, I want to travel now. I want to see this, but I'm so afraid. Oh, but yes.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Amazing work. I just want to see more. I just want to see so much more. And I'm fascinated at seeing the surveying, and or just even like the nature of surveying and looking at these. And you always wonder, what are people looking at, and where does this information go, and like who is this information for? Because you encounter it in your daily life, and it's this sort of thing that someone is dividing up your paths of access, and at the same time not acknowledging you, but then right next to you, and there's these whole conversations that could happen.
Yeah, thank you very much for your comments, Richard. Appreciate it.
Joel, thank you so much. Such amazing work. I just want to, throw in a compliment too, and talking about the invisibility of something I've always thought driving up and down California, the invisibility of barbed wire and the threat of it too, is this kind of like back and forth between when you see it and how dangerous it can be, and the just the danger of that, and the ideas that kind of come with thinking about a diorama and its intention to, for the masters of the universe to look down at what we're going to do, but to redefine what that is like, no, this is going away, that fence is gone. I think is a really lovely kind of not a trick, but it's a great way of looking at a diorama in a way that is like, this is about taking this space away, maybe. Really wonderful work.
Thank you, James.
Deborah, your mic's not on.
Sorry. I'm going to be really interested, Joel, to see where this goes for you, because I know you have a lot of ideas that are being generated out of this process in the last 6 months. So it'll be really, really interesting to take note. I'm going to keep my eye on where you go with this. It's a great work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We have reached our conclusion, and we would like to thank all of the artists presenting today. Thank you so much for your thoughtful words and very deliberate and wonderful presentations. It was so wonderful of you to share in behalf of my department. I certainly can speak for our pride in you, and I want to say, mic's off, congratulations. Deborah, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes. So I want to just second that. Annaleah, Carissa, Jillian, Darius, and Joel, what great job you did today. We're really, really proud of you and your process and where you've landed. And we hope you the best for you in the future after you graduate. And I'm going to suggest that everybody turn on their microphones and we can clap for our graduates.
Yay! Congratulations. Great work, everybody. Awesome.
Awesome.
So good.
Congratulations.
And
Wonderful.
thank you, respondents, for your really thoughtful words. And
Yeah.
speak up. Yeah, thank you.
Very, very thoughtful. Brought up things that I hadn't thought about, even in work that I've been watching, develop over the last several months. So we're really, really appreciative. So thank you for everybody for coming, and respondents and participants, presenters, if you could just stay for a couple of minutes so we can